Rahubat family. So in this particular PowerPoint, it's actually like a part two of a video that I made a few years ago in 2020, as far as Nuabu being the science of sciences and the science in sciences. And I think the video was a little bit complicated for most people because I think the definitions of the terminologies were not, totally clear. So in this particular PowerPoint, I'm gonna do a short PowerPoint explaining Nuabu from the perspective of it being scientific method and mathematical method combined. Let's get right into it. So I would like to first start by letting people know that when you hear the term Nuabu, and it is said to mean right knowledge, right wisdom, right overstanding, which leads to sound right reasoning, which leads ultimately to sound right action. You're using different terminologies to describe what scientists of the scientific community call scientific and mathematical method. Now, you don't really hear much about the mathematical method in today's scientific community as much as you hear scientific method, but nonetheless, there is a such thing as scientific method and mathematical method. And that's going to be outlined in this particular PowerPoint. Also, I'm going to try to relate it to certain sacred geometry information that was relayed to us in the Holy Tablets, chapter 1. So the first step in breaking down Nuwaubu as a science is actually properly defining what is meant by the statement that Nuwaubu is the science of sciences and the science in sciences. It must first be stated that the science of sciences is also called the science of God because it is the method that God uses to create. Thus, it is also the science of creating and the science of creation. Defining science. Science is defined as a system, method, technique, or process used for acquiring knowledge and information based on experiences with natural phenomena. Scientific knowledge can be used to explain and predict the causes, effects, and composition of natural phenomena. So when we say natural phenomena, we're talking about just the physical world, the natural world, right? And the events and objects, or I should say objects and events that we pretty much observe in nature. Science is the unification of theoretical knowledge called episteme and methods for practical application of knowledge to produce results called technique. Originally, the word science meant knowledge acquired by learning or studying, but in actuality, the word science was derived from the Latin words scientia and scire, meaning knowledge and to know, which were derived from the older Proto-Indo-European word sciai, meaning to separate, to distinguish, to split, cleave, rend, or divide. So just going back to the two words that's in the brackets, episteme and techne. Um, techne is the root of the word technology and also magic. And I'm going to do another PowerPoint to show you guys how technology and magic and engineering as well are like synonymous with each other. Episteme is the etymological root of the word knowledge, right? It's a study of knowledge is called epistemology. So that, was to define those particular words. They're actually root words in which certain words originate from. And when we say in the etymological definition of science that the part where it's defined from an older language, the Proto-Indo-European word sciai, meaning to separate, to distinguish, to split, to cleave, rend, or divide. One of the major reasons why it took on this meaning in the etymology is because science is divided into two parts, the known and the unknown, or what we now today call the infinite and the finite, right? So let's go to the next slide. The concept of dividing and separating when it comes to knowledge was depicted in the ancient Kemet story of the deity Ptah, who was the opener or the creator that rose or separated from what was called the chaotic waters or fire water. of noon. When looking at the etymology of the word information, the general scientific definition of information is that which differentiates, separates, or distinguishes one thing from another. Therefore, this lets us know that knowledge is acquired by the input or receiving of information or data to the mind by way of the senses. So let's break that down in simple terms because I like to be simplistic so that people understand exactly what it is that they're actually learning. When we look at the etymological sense of the word information, that was distinguishes, separates, or differentiates one thing from another. So now let me paint a picture in your mind. Let's look at the world. We have grass, we have animals, we have a sky, we have subatomic particles. We have all of these different things, and all of them are different, separate, and distinguished from one another. Now, information, based on the etymological sense of the word, is anything that can be detected by the senses, right? Because when we say that we experience things, you can only experience things in the physical realm by your physical senses, the five senses, right? And so anything that is in a different form or different manifestation from another thing is considered to also be information. So therefore, your phone is information, right? Because it can be detected by the physical senses. And the phone is different than a book. So even though a book is information, right? They're both distinguished as two separate objects. So I want to make that clear. Information literally means anything that could be detected by the physical senses that is differentiated or separate or distinguished from another thing. That's any object that you can see, hear, feel, or touch, right? Or taste. Okay, so now another thing is I want you to keep in mind that you can only experience information, objects, and events by your physical senses. And Nuabu is basically, you'll see once when I get a little further in the slide, is only a system of proper information processing, right? Because I made a video about the three primary axioms or the three primary laws of nature. And the second law was the purpose of the mind is to acquire and apply knowledge related to survival, right? And the reason why that's so important is because we can't realistically solve problems with misinformation. But if you have all of the information, you can actually take it through the information processes, which I'm going to show you in different slides how to actually do that, which you do it anyway, but they just basically came up with a name for it and started practicing it as a way of life in ancient African and Sumerian cultures and civilizations. But you process things by the mind. And, excuse me, you process things, you detect objects and events with the senses, and you process it by the mind to be able to draw the proper conclusion on whether it should be something you should do or shouldn't do, right? Or just like in the Holy Tablets, so where it says right knowledge or right wisdom and right understanding, sound right reason, and Nuabu teaches you how to do, when to do, what to do, and why to do. That is because it gives you a methodology of information processing where you can actually properly observe something and know whether or not that is right or wrong, right? Because that's basically what we're talking about here. We're talking about whether something is right to do or wrong to do. And in the future slides, you're going to see exactly how that process works. Information is energy, and energy is matter. Thus, information is all, both everything and nothing simultaneously. Thus, the proper way to define the science of sciences is the knowledge of knowledges, and the proper way to define the science in sciences is the knowledge in knowledge. More simply put, the science of sciences is what's presently called scientific method, and this is represented by a circle. The circle represents what is called the empirical method, and the empirical method of sciences is just simply saying you gather information by way of your senses. So if you go to chapter 1, tablet 1, verse 6, right, in the Holy Tablets, the Gadush Lohat, it says, these supreme beings called Anunnaki or Neteru, whose way of life was called Nuabu, were endowed by El Kulum, the All, with a superior overstanding of 720 degrees in all, 360 degrees of spiritual or ethereal state, the circle, and 360 degrees of the physical material state, the square. So in this PowerPoint, I'm going to break down the square and the circle and what the symbolism behind squaring the circle, which is just based on scientific and mathematical methods of information processing. And you'll see what the circle represents, and that's 360 degrees because the circle is 360 degrees of knowledge, right? And then there is the square, which is also 360 degrees of knowledge. This is sacred geometry, by the way, family. And when you square the circle, or when you basically are able to use both methodologies properly of information processing, that is scientific method, which is called the science of sciences, and mathematical method, which is called the science in sciences, when we're able to use these methods properly, right, to be able to produce sound right action and sound right reasoning, this is called squaring the circle, and it gives us 720 degrees of knowledge. So we're going to go to the next slide. The science in sciences is represented by the square and should be defined as the mathematical method, which is called the rational method, which basically means the processing of information by the mind. Therefore, the science of sciences is the scientific method, called the empirical method, and represents being able to use your physical senses to detect natural phenomena or information. The science in sciences is called the mathematical method or the rational method, and literally represents using your mind to process the information detected by your physical senses. So as I explained before, with the square and the circle, right? Now, we know that the circle is what represents the empirical method. And we know that the square represents the mathematical or rational method. So that would mean that the circle would represent the senses, right? Empirical knowledge, being able to detect things through your sight, touch, smell, and so on and so forth. And we know that the square is the rational method. These processes in the square are what allows your mind to be able to process the information that the senses have detected, to be able to basically make a conclusion or bring about an effective result. So we're going to use a simple example to use the scientific method, something real stupid, right? Okay, so if I went to the store yesterday and I woke up this morning and I couldn't find my wallet, and I knew that I left my wallet, or had an assumption, or what we would call in science a hypothesis, that I left my wallet in my pants pocket, I would go in the dirty clothes hamper where I put them, which is called research, right? And or experiment, and be able to go in my pants pocket to check. Once when I didn't see my wallet in my pants pocket, I start drawing other hypotheses. Well, maybe I left it in the car, or I was sitting on the passenger side of the seat, so maybe it was left in the door, or maybe it could have dropped out of the side. This process of, in this particular minute example, is how the mind works when it is actually trying to use the science of sciences or scientific or empirical method, and the science in sciences or the mathematical or rational method of information processing, right? So let's say, for example, now I'm going to actually look in the various different places based on the hypothesis of the potential places that I could have left the wallet, in which that I came up with in my mind, right? And then let's say I go to these places and I actually find the wallet in one of those places. Then I draw the conclusion or the result that the prior hypothesis that I made of where I left it was correct. This is a small example. I have like 1,000 examples for it, but I'm just trying to give you guys a understanding that it's not rocket science. What is breaking down is given very, I think, complex terminologies to describe something that we do every single day. But I think that once when you understand the terminologies, right, and the processes and how they actually work, the whole goal of Nuwaubu is to enable you to be able to do that with perfection. So let's go to the next slide. The breakdown of scientific and mathematical method in Nuwaubu. Now on the left side, I have the scientific method, which is also called the empirical method, right? And then on the right side, I have the mathematical method, which is also called the rational method. So on the left side is based on your senses, right? The physical senses. And the right side is based on the methods that's used by your actual mind. However, there's no pure sense perception without mental processing, and there's no pure mental processing without sense perception. So that must be understood. They work hand in hand simultaneously to a point to where you don't know where one starts and where one actually ends. And so this particular PowerPoint, I think is something good for you guys to actually study and memorize the 4 scientific or empirical methods and the 4 mathematical or rational methods, because when you say right knowledge, right wisdom, and right understanding, you are summarizing this particular chart. That's all you're doing. You're summarizing scientific and mathematical method. And remember, in the Holy Tablets, it says that we have 3 tests, right? Experience, evidence, and reason or reasoning. Why is that? Because we experience evidence and we use it to reason. So these 3 methodologies of tests are what allows us to be able to properly draw the correct conclusions on whatever premise or hypothesis that we have outlined based on whatever we have observed or whatever it is we're trying to do, whatever, determined effort we're trying to make in whatever arena. So I put this whole picture together because it has great symbolism. And there's a real powerful meaning in this symbol, which is one of the symbols of the imperial order. But one of the main things I wanted you guys to focus on with this picture is the actual 720. Because 720 degrees, again, it goes back to chapter 1, tablet 1, verse 6, where it says that the all endowed the Anunnaki with 720 degrees of knowledge, right? And it specifically says 360 degrees circle and 360 degrees square. Now, always remember, scientific method symbolizes the circle, and mathematical method symbolizes the square, right? And when you square the circle, that means you put the 4 scientific methods back to back with the 4 mathematical methods, and it goes scientific method, mathematical method, scientific method, mathematical method, scientific method, mathematical method, scientific method, and the last one is the mathematical method of the results that you actually breed in that whole process. So this is just basically how the actual mind works. That's all it is. All these concepts are saying in simple terms is how the mind processes information that has been detected by the physical senses. So in other words, right knowledge, right wisdom, and right understanding are a summary of the scientific method in which we use in information processing. And what is information processing? Information processing is the series of steps we use by using our physical senses and our mind to draw conclusions about information that we've experienced. And again, experiencing information can only take place in what way? By the physical senses. One of your 5 senses has to come in contact with some form of natural phenomena or information in order for it to enter the mind, right, and be able to process it. Now, again, information based on its etymological meaning or the sense of the word, meaning that which differentiates, separates, or distinguishes one thing from another. So everything that your physical senses can detect is in fact information. I don't care if it's a house, if it's a car, a road, food, liquids, whatever it is, grass, carpet, whatever it is, any object that we see in nature is in fact information, because it is something that can be processed by the physical senses, or detected by the physical senses, and they all differentiate or distinguish or separate one thing from another. So in this particular slide right here, family, I gave you the scientific method in yellow, and I gave you the mathematical method in yellow, and this actually is the order that we detect and process things with our senses in our mind. And like I was explaining in the previous slide, it goes from scientific method, experience, mathematical method, comprehension, scientific method, analysis, then back to mathematical method analysis, then back to scientific method hypothesis, then back to mathematical method for synthesis, back to the scientific method for experiment, and then back to the mathematical method for results. This is literally how the mind actually works, right? And we're going to get into exactly how that actually can be broken down when we further get through most of the slides. I just want to actually keep you guys basically focused on not so much of the complexity of the words science of sciences, science in sciences, but more scientific method represents an empirical method. And empirical method is just basically physical proof, physical evidence based on observation or experience. And again, certain things I'm going to say redundantly because I want it to actually stick out in you guys' mind. You can only experience information in the physical world by using your physical senses. There is no other way you can experience information, right? Other than through your physical senses. And once when your physical senses actually intake or detect the information that you've actually taken in, it actually goes to the mind, and now the mind is able to process that information to come to a conclusion as to what something is or isn't. Another thing that you guys need to understand is that the scientific method and the mathematical method are things that you can actually create in your own way, a more stronger sense of application of it. Because if it wasn't able to be manipulated to be better applied, then there would be no such thing as Nuwaubu. And a lot of it is based on the information that we actually intake, that we allow ourselves to intake, and the sources that we actually gain this information from, right? So it's very important that we understand how to do research, how to go get information to know whether or not something is actually correct or incorrect. Because I think that is how we all got under the spell, or one of the ways that we got under the spell, and that is hard to break, simply because most people don't know how to actually do the research and qualify information as true or false. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give you guys an actual outline of the scientific and mathematical method in the order of the mental processing. And if you guys have any questions, or if I made anything confusing, by all means, hit me up in the comment section and let me know, because I want you all to get this. And I have another PowerPoint that I'm actually going to put out about it, but it's going to be more geared toward the philosophy of it all. So, the starting point of the actual information processes is experience. Information is received by way of the senses into the mind, right? The mind then uses comprehension and analogous reasoning to understand, comprehend, and make sense of the information that it has experienced. The analogies, metaphors, similes, mathematical objects, mythologies, parables, words, letters, numbers, shapes, and whatever other abstractions that were created in the mind for the purpose of comprehension then become theories with which the mind can process. The mind then begins to analyze the theoretical abstractions using what's called inductive reasoning to see how the information can be used to benefit the mind. From the mental analysis or decomposition of the information, the mind then generates multiple hypotheses by brainstorming and divergent thinking about the identity of, meaning of, use of, cause of, or effect of the information, and then uses abductive reasoning to select the most probable choice from the set of hypotheses. The mind then begins to use what's called convergent thinking to come up with ways to synthesize what is known about the empirical world with what is hypothesized in the rational world. This mental synthesis enables the ability to use the experienced information with the new created hypothesis by way of experimentation, which are like tests, trials, or attempts. After the information is tried in experimentation, The mind determines a result, and this is then experienced, and the cycle repeats itself. So from experience to comprehension, then from comprehension to theories, then from theories to analyzation or analysis, from analysis to hypothesis, from hypothesis to synthesis, and from synthesis, experimentation, and then from experimentation, we conclude a result. Every second of the day that we are thinking and figuring things out, or just existing, period, we go through these processes. The whole purpose or goal of studying these processes is so that you can better come to the right conclusions as to what to do or what not to do, because all of this is training you to be able to better increase your survival, which is the primary axiom, right? So if you go back to my video on my old YouTube channel, it's called the 3 primary axioms. I break down how the first primary axiom is called the #1 dynamic principle of existence, and the #1 dynamic principle of existence is survive. That means that everything here, I don't care what it is, it could be plants, animals, humans, the universe, subatomic particles, so on and so forth. It's all here to do one goal: survive. The ultimate success is obviously immortality, and the ultimate failure is death. So what people don't realize is that non-ether is trying to perfect itself in the physical form, right? It is trying to actually perfect itself to be able to live in the physical form longer and longer and longer and longer as it can in the spiritual world. So when it actually gives a portion of itself to a physical being to be able to create a body for it to be able to manifest itself physically, when we die, all of our experiences, we are absorbed back into the same spiritual substance, and basically it learns more because there is a certain portion, the full portion of itself, it cannot come into the physical. There's no body that could contain non-ether to its highest capacity, right? We only can get to a certain capacity on the physical realm. And what I mean by that is, if we could live the full capacity of non-ether, we'd be able to transform to matter and energy at will, right? Because it can transform to matter and become physical, as well as through the process of death, we go back to itself, or it goes back to itself, because I and non-ether are one. So with that being said, non-ether is trying to perfect itself by taking on physical forms, letting the different forms gain the experiences of the physical existence. And then when we die, we go back to non-ether, and all of our experiences are absorbed by non-ether, and it keeps getting more powerful and more powerful and more powerful to be able to put itself in a physical form and be able to transform from the physical to the ethereal at will, right? That's why the intellect of certain people are so high, or much more higher in their capacity to learn or gain information, because there's a certain portion of the conscious awareness aspect of non-ether that it gives different individuals, so that they can be able to come do just a little bit more as far as like the learning process, which are usually our master teachers and our sages and gurus and so on and so forth. And it basically allows for different beings to learn different things, even though all of us, regardless of what your capacity and capability of thinking is, it still helps the overall goal to be able to gain experience and take it back to non-ether. So I'm gonna end it with that. I'm definitely gonna do another video on non-ether, and how non-ether uses the process of Nuabu, or scientific and mathematical method, to create and manifest various different aspects of matter or material forms from undifferentiated matter, which is in the spiritual realm. Wadu family.